Lucien Maier presents No More by Lucien Maier. Read for you by Lucien Maier. Edited by Temperance Penrod. Audio production and music by John Stanley. And now, presenting No More by Lucien Maier.
Clara wanted nothing more than to curl up in a ball and remain in her bed the rest of the day where it was safe. They would be on the bus waiting for her. It had all started in second grade. Claire had been very open and very excited about school and friends, but that year Jen started to criticize how she dressed. It was petty at first, but within 2 years Jen had recruited 2 of her friends and the teasing had become merciless. Every year it had gotten worse. So Clara pulled further and further away from everything. Reading had become an escape over the years, and the books leaned more and more towards stories of people finding their place in the world. An hour later, she stood on the corner and grimaced as the bus came around the corner to pick her up. The bus stopped and the doors opened with a whoosh. She boarded and walked with her head down to the seat that she sat in every day. "Nice shirt, Clara," Jen balked. She ignored her. "Where'd you get it, the old folks' home?" One of Jen's flunkies chimed in. She ignored her, too, as best she could. "Wow," a voice came. He was in the back of them, and they had paid no attention. He had moved into the neighborhood a week ago, and he was a senior, and Jen and her friends now became very interested in the new guy at the back of the bus. Clara could not believe her luck. Hopefully they would be too preoccupied making goo-goo faces at this new guy and not harass her the rest of the trip. She was wrong, but it would not be as bad as she thought. Jen had misread the wow out of his lips as a sign that he was okay with the teasing. She started back into the shirt. "Do you always wear shirts from your dad's closet?" she laughed out. And what if she did have to borrow clothes from her dad? Which, by the way, is not what it looks like to me. But if she did really have to, do you think that criticizing her about that is funny? He said in a smoky voice. "Oh, don't worry about her. No one gives a crap about her. My name's Jen. What's yours, sexy?" she asked in her best flirty tone. "Not interested," he said. "Whatever. Side with the little skank. I don't care. No one likes her. Hang out with her and you're nothing at our school," she snapped out, now angry. Her attraction to him made her rethink. "But you don't know any better," she smiled. "If you want, you can come sit by me," Jen asked him. She was encouraged when he got up from his seat, but he did not sit next to her. He walked straight to the seat next to Clara. "Mind if I sit here?" She stared at him blankly for a moment, not sure how to react to this. He stood patiently smiling for a moment longer. "If you want, I can go back to my seat," he said. His shoulders slumped a little bit. The confidence that he had around the bullies he did not have around her. Sorry, sure, you can sit down," Clara replied. She could not help but glance back at the girls who had tormented her. They were all straight green jealous. Then she turned her attention back to the guy. "Hi, my name's Randy," he said, holding his hand out to shake. "My name's Clara," she said, holding her hand out to shake a bit longer than she should have. He smiled shyly as the handshake broke. "You just moved in?" she asked. "Yeah, it's killing me. The moving truck should be here today with my bike, and then I won't have to ride this bus anymore. But for today, I'm stuck," Randy replied. "Well, the school's a couple miles away. I don't know if you'd want to ride a bicycle," she commented, hoping he would not rush off the bus. "Oh, sorry, it's not a pedal bike. I have a motorcycle," he said nonchalantly. However, everyone within earshot was trying to listen to the conversation, and the mention of a motorcycle and the new guy were driving curiosity levels on the bus very high. They continued with light small talk, and as the bus pulled into the school, Clara's face was starting to turn down. She knew once he was in the school, he would never talk to her again. However, to her surprise, he asked, "Can you show me where the office is?" She quickly replied that she would be happy to. This started the best day Clara ever experienced at school. Randy carried himself with confidence, a confidence high school kids hardly ever get. By proxy, she flowed with him through his day. They did not have any classes together, but since he was a senior, he only had 3 classes in the morning, and the rest of the day he went to her classes because he had to wait for the bus to get him home. On the way home, he made a point of asking for Clara's number in front of Jen. About a half an hour after she walked into the door of her house, she got a text, and it read, "My bike came, come see it." She rushed out the door and rode her 10-speed to the house. And there in his garage, he was happily tinkering on his bike. It was a 500cc older bike from the 80s. It was apparent he had spent a long time bringing it to the level it was at now. "Wow, it's awesome," she said as she rolled up. He looked up with a big grease smudge across his nose. She could not help but giggle. He looked at her confused, and she reached out and rubbed the grease from his nose and then held up a dark finger to him. He smiled and then began to laugh. That, I'm afraid, is pretty much par for the course for me. She sat in the garage until 8 that night. He taught her about the bike as he went through everything. She was engrossed. She did not realize what time it was and wound up rushing home 2 hours late. Her mom was mad, but Clara was preoccupied by thinking about Randy and didn't much mind being sent to her room. The next morning came, and she was unhappily waiting at the bus stop. Randy would ride his bike today, which means that she would be left alone with the bullies. She was wrong. As the bus turned the corner, a bike shot in front of it and pulled out in front of the stop. "Come on," Randy said. She ran over, and she could feel all the eyes on the bus on her. He handed her a helmet, which was too big, but she strapped it on as best she could and climbed on the back, and they took off. A few moments later, they pulled into the school, again, all eyes following them. She had a good day at school. However, the dread started to build after Randy left after lunch. She would have to ride the bus home alone. Jen had her number too. The 2 days of envy opened fully on that bus. The 3 girls said things to Clara that she would never forget, and it was not even halfway through the ride that Clara was crying full force. The bus finally got to her stop. She rushed off the bus, and like an angel, there stood Randy with a smile on his face. It dropped off quickly when he caught sight of Clara's face, and his eyes now burned with anger. "Wait here," he said, and walked over to the bus as the driver was closing the door. But before he could shut the door all the way, a black motorcycle boot stuck in it. He pushed it open and walked on the bus, and he looked at the driver. "Leave it open." Randy walked to the back where the 3 girls sat looking confused at him. "No more, you leeches," he said directly to them. "You're pathetic to pick on a girl just because you can. It's sad, really." His voice got louder. "But the saddest thing is that you all allowed it," he said, waving to the bus. "How many stupid comments have you all overlooked out of fear of becoming the next target? That you somehow respect these girls is beyond me, but that you allow them to do this is criminal. None of you deserve to have someone treat you like Clara is treated every day." "Wouldn't you want someone, anyone, to stand up for you?" Randy asked. "You know, my folks said I would love this town for the rest of my high school. Well, I'm glad I met Clara, but as for the rest of you, I really don't want anything to do with you," Randy said. As he walked off, he looked at the driver. "This is your job to stop this stuff. Next time, do it," Randy said, and walked out to Clara. Everyone was quiet on the bus as they pulled away. "What a jerk," Jen said, but 3 people looked at her and told her to shut up. Her power had been stripped away. People looked at her with disgust. Putting Clara back together would prove much harder over the next few days. Randy had taken her home and explained the situation to Clara's mom, who had probed her daughter before, but she would never admit to any problem. Her mom was so much more understanding than Clara thought she would be. She even called the school and let them know the situation. Clara's mom asked if she could stay home from school for a while until Clara could collect herself. That night, Randy came back over with a beat-up old paperback. She read the book about a seagull who could never accept his limits. Even though it was a small book, she read it twice that day. The next day after lunch, she went over to Randy's house. He was not home yet, but his mom asked for her to wait because he'd only be a moment. Randy pulled up on his bike a few minutes later, and she walked over to him. "You read the book?" he asked. She hugged him. "It was exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you so much," she said. He smiled. "Well, good. Now we need to teach you how to fly." Behind him, his father pulled up on a truck, and behind the truck was a trailer with an old beat-up 250cc bike. "You got a new bike?" she asked. "No, you got a new bike," he said, as a mirror fell off the bike. "Well, maybe not new," he smiled. They spent the next 3 days together in that garage, slowly bringing the small motorcycle back to a point where she could ride it. Then he taught her to ride. They were even able to get her to the DMV to take her motorcycle test that Friday. That weekend, she rode with Randy and showed him all around town. They had long conversations, but more importantly, she had long conversations with herself in the silent that only comes when you're riding. Sunday night rolled around, and Randy had been asked by Clara's mom to join them for dinner. They ate and talked, and Monday morning came up. "I want to go back to school tomorrow," Clara said. "Are you sure, honey?" her mom asked. For sure. I'm not the girl that rode that bus anymore, Mom. I can handle it. Sure enough, Clara was ready to ride to school as Randy pulled up. They passed the bus on their way to school. Now, all the kids knew Randy's bike by now, but they didn't know who was on the second. Clara might have been right that she was not the same girl, but what she had not expected is that the whole school would have changed too. She was pulled into the principal's office, and he apologized over and over. He let her know that Jen had been suspended and would not be allowed to bother her again. So it was. Clara was not bothered by anyone, and although Jen never said anything, the other two girls apologized to her many times. People at the school treated her much better, but not only that, they watched out for others. They had taken Randy's words to heart. They decided as a school that they would not allow it to happen to anyone at their school. The year was amazing until the summer. Randy graduated and then announced that he would be going to college out of state. It destroyed Clara. "How the heck am I going to get through the next year, Randy?" she asked him one night before he left. "Get through? I expect a lot more out of you than just to get through. Why do you think I wanted to know you that first day on the bus?" he asked. "You felt sorry for me?" she answered, matter of fact. "No," he replied. "I saw me in you. I came from the same thing. I used to be teased so much, but when I hit 16 and I got the bike, I stopped taking crap. I stopped letting them define who I am. I decided that was my job. Once I took that power out of their hands, they could never get it over me again. And now you've done the same thing," Randy said. "With your help," she added. "Maybe that's true, but I suppose that means you have to help someone someday too," Randy replied. A few days later, Randy was packed up and gone. It was not easy for Clara, but she was able to move forward. He had been right. They were never able to exercise that power over her again. They asked her to speak at her graduation. She walked up to the podium. "No more," she started. "Those two words changed my life. You see, I was picked on all through my younger years. And then one day a guy came along, and he said, 'No more,'" she said, trying to hold back the tears in her eyes. "And you know what? He changed everything. He had the courage to stand up and tell them to leave me alone. And he had an open heart to show me how to be strong. It's hard because I miss him every day. Why? Because I see him in all of you every day. He made us a better school, and he made us better people, and I have tried to make sure that no one is allowed to be bullied in our school. I'm glad to graduate, but I hope you will make it a tradition in our school that we will never allow this to happen again." The audience erupted in cheers. More importantly, her words stayed with them, and every year they hung a huge banner that said, "No more," in the main hall. They became a model to all other schools of how to root out bullies. After a graduation dinner, many of her friends went off to a party, but she rode home with her mom, and to her surprise, there sat Randy on his bike in the driveway. "Good speech," he said, smiling as she ran into his hug. "Thanks, I had good inspiration," she said. "Want to go for a ride?" he asked. "Be right back," she said, rushing towards the house. She stopped. She turned and walked back to him, and she kissed him long on the lips. After the kiss broke, Randy was bright red. "I have been waiting to do that for an awfully long time," Clara said. "I'm glad you did," Randy said. She ran into the house, and a moment later she was in her riding gear, and they disappeared down the road.